The Devinci Kobain has a Canadian-made aluminium frame that hopes to offer mountain biking nirvana. Or did it just have us saying, never mind?
It's really impressive that Devinci can make a budget bike in Canada, so it's made in their factories in northern Quebec, and it's the only value bike that's made in North America.
Yeah, it's got that kind of classic hardtail silhouette. I really like how this frame looks. Apparently the paint job sparkles in the sunlight, although we haven't seen any sun, so I haven't really seen it sparkle, but that's a thing, I think.
And it's also the only bike that has externally eroded cables, the only one that we have here at least. That used to maybe not be as trendy. Now it seems to be kind of coming back on trend.
The Kobain's available in 4 sizes and 3-part specs. The one we have in is the Dior 12-speed. It's not actually a full Dior drivetrain though. It does have race-face cranks and chainring and a sun-raised cassette.
The bike weighs 31 pounds, so is the lightest of the bikes in this value field test, and we can confirm the tyres weren't pumped up with lithium. But how does this hardtail climb?
Basically, the Kobain climbs exactly how you would want a hardtail to climb. It's not one of those all-out speed cross-country bikes, but it's also not a more aggressive, kind of aimed at the downhill type of hardtail, and so it really hits that middle ground, which you get on the bike and you're like, oh, this is comfortable, this is efficient enough, this is exactly what I was expecting this bike to feel like.
It's got good handling on a variety of terrain. Again, it's not one of those super slack, kind of downhill-oriented hardtails, and it's not trying to be, and I like that. It also has those 2.6-inch wide tires, which help give you some grip in the looser conditions, and then that 12-speed drivetrain with that easier gear, kind of nice for grinding your way up to the top of those steep climbs.
You're never going to have that all-out traction on a hardtail that you can get with a full suspension bike, but the position's comfortable, it gets up the things, you have to choose your lines a little bit more carefully. It has a 75-degree seat tube angle, so it kind of puts you in a good position for climbing, and I thought it, got up the things pretty well.
Yeah, it's got that lockout too if you really want to go for that full rigid experience, maybe on a mellower trail or doing some bike packing. You have some adjustments there.
With its 65.5-degree head tube angle and 2-piston brakes, the Devinci isn't designed to be an all-out brute on the descents. So where does that put it? And what did our reviewers make of its descending capabilities?
Compared to the other 2 hardtails we have on test, the Kobain's a little bit pointier in the really steep stuff. It has a shorter travel fork. It's got that 130 Z2. So you do need to pick your line a little bit more carefully. But again, it's got those big tires. And you can get down some pretty techy stuff, within reason. It's a comfortable, competent descender.
It definitely hits that middle ground where you're not going to be sending it on every descent like you might be on a more aggressive bike, but it's also, you can get into some pretty fun terrain. I definitely picked my lines a little bit more carefully when I was going into more technical trails.
It has plenty of room to run a longer travel dropper post, although Devinci did spec kind of a little bit shorter post. The size medium has a 130, so if you do find yourself in those steeper trails, you might want to upgrade that in the future, but as it is, not the end of the world.
Something that's always nice when you're riding is that the bike is relatively quiet, and it has, little clips on the cables on the front end so that they aren't, rattling about. It makes it look tidier as well, which is always a nice little touch, especially on a value bike.
As far as the frame feel goes, it's not as stiff as the Haro Saguaro we have, and it's not as, compliant, I'd say, as the Marin San Quentin. Falls in the middle ground there. I think it hits a nice sweet spot as far as overall stiffness. As far as its actual handling, the kind of trails, what was the best trail you rode this on?
I think my favorite thing to ride it on was the kind of more flowy trails, a little bit faster corners, like just something that you're kind of like going to be going down, giggling at high speed and, just a little bit smoother than you can take it in like slightly chunkier things, but you have to think about it a little bit more. But yeah, on the smooth trails is really where it really shone, I thought. Like, is that what you kind of thought, Jim?
Yeah, and last night I took it on a nice ride that had a mix of some techier bits, kind of a more rolling trail, but there were short, little steep, chunky sections, and I think that was where it was great, because you didn't have to, you're not worrying about hanging on and holding on for the ride for thousands and thousands of vert, but if you get some, short, chunky bits with some recovery sections in between, it was super fun. So I think if you can pump the terrain and just enjoy the technical parts, and then have some flow to mix it up, that's kind of where this bike shines. And that's probably similar to the trails around Devinci's headquarters in Quebec, so it makes sense that that's where, in my mind, I kept thinking like, this is probably what Quebec's like, it's great.
So, a comfortable frame that offers a good mix of trail-focused geometry, even if it isn't as descent-skewed as something like the Marin. What about the spec?
The brakes on the Kobain are 2-piston brakes, and they have 180mm rotors, which, you might be a little bit scared since they're resin-only rotors. But unlike the bikes that we had last time I did a value field test in 2021, these brakes actually slowed down, they actually stopped. I wasn't terrified, going into things with a little bit more speed. I would say brakes are the thing that have really improved the most since the last time I rode a value bike.
Yeah, I think so too. These are the Shimano BR 420 brakes, and we've had good things to say about them in the past. It's kind of different tiers, and this is where the brakes actually start to have some power and slow you down. Again, even though they're resin only. They actually work pretty well in the wet. Like there are things to upgrade in the future, but it's not something you need to swap immediately, which is always nice. The tires are great too. We mentioned those before. So it's got the Maxxis DHR in the rear, DHF in the front, kind of that classic combo. And they're 2.6 inches wide. They are the dual compound, and it's their exo casing. So you're not going to have the stickiest, most durable thing, but they worked, I'd say, fine. So I was glad to see those on there. Plenty of odd slippery rocks around here, and I didn't have any trouble at all.
Yeah, not like Dario on the bridge on another bike.
Yeah, that one, we have some footage you'll see at some point of some sliding and some sideways crashing, but not on this bike, which is great.
Yeah, I definitely felt a lot more confident with that rubber than some of the other bikes. And yeah, the tires make such a big difference, and it's nice to see that Devinci kind of, put a little bit of money into the tires on this bike. Another thing they put some money into is the fork. And the fork, the Z2 that it has on this bike worked really well. Yeah, no issues there. It has a lockout, it has rebound adjustments. And so, yeah, it was, on a hardtail, the fork is extra important. And so it's great to see one that worked well on this bike.
We've had a little bit of inconsistency with some of the Marzocchi Z2 forks, not so much in the performance, but in the adjustment feel. Some of them, the rebound there's actually no clicks. You just kind of turn it, and this one has clicks in one direction. So if you slow down the rebound on this bike, there's clicks. But then when you go to speed it up, there are no clicks. So just a little setup thing that could make it a little more tricky, but on the trail, there was no issues with the performance. So it's a good fork though, at this price point for sure.
And then another little thing was neither of us really jived with that saddle. It's like a nice width with that, which I think is nice, and it has a good shape. It's like short, but it's very hard. And on a hardtail, you kind of want extra comfort and something that doesn't have kind of too pointy edges on it as well, if you're kind of...
Yeah, that seat's not doing this any favors. I want a little bit of comfort cushion in there. It's not there, but something that, again, personal preference, but our preference would be something a little bit more comfortable.
If we can ignore the irresistible correlation between grunge-loving Canadians that happen to have a penchant for domestic manufacturing, who is this bike for?
The Kobain is really just for somebody who wants a solid hardtail. They don't want to think about too much, not have to upgrade too many things. It's just like, get this bike, take it out, and go for a ride wherever you want to go.
Yeah, it shines on those flowier trails, but it can definitely handle some tech. It really is that kind of do-it-all category. It's not trying to be something super long and slack in your hardcore hardtail. It's like your friendly hardtail. You just hop on it and have a good time, and that's really what it is. It's a mountain bike.
What are the bike's pros and cons?
One of the pros for me, of course, is that it's made in Canada, but if that's not important to you, it's also got a really solid feel and a really solid part spec. And so you won't have to go and upgrade a lot on this bike if you just want to ride it out of the box. And it's got a really fair price at $1,900, and then it's also on sale for 25% off. So yeah, pretty fair price. Is there any downsides to this bike?
Yeah, I think as far as part spec goes, if we're going to nitpick a little bit, we did mention it could probably use a longer travel dropper post. And it would have been nice to see a full Dior drivetrain, but overall, those are kind of little minor quibbles, nothing major. And then the final con, it's kind of one of those ones where this is a jack of all trades, master of none bike. If you're someone that's looking for an XC bike, hang out with your super speedy buddies, this one isn't going to be the bike to do the job. Same thing if you want to go hang out with your buddies that are on their hardcore hardtails, it's also not going to do that either. So if you're looking for more of a niche hardtail, this isn't it, or for the all-rounder, that's the Devinci Kobain.
The Devinci is a well-rounded bike then, at good value. That said, it's not the best at anything. It's certainly not an XC race bike, but you will be able to find the limit on the descent when pushing hard. Similarly, it's also not a hardcore hardtail. To some people, this might represent an amazing compromise of all the things they want. Other times, they might find it a bit limited. Thank you for watching the Value Bike Field Test. Be sure to subscribe to Pinkbike so you never miss our latest mountain biking videos.